Coming up on The World Today, President Joe Biden confirms killing of leader of Al-Qaeda, Ayman Al-Zawahiri, in a drone strike in Afghanistan. Top U.S. Democrat Nancy Pelosi visits Taiwan as part of tour of Asia despite sharp warnings from China. Plus, Russia accuses U.S. of direct involvement in the war in Ukraine for the first time. A warm welcome to the program. I'm Millicent Walker in Lagos. We begin with the confirmation by the U.S. President of the killing of the leader of Al-Qaeda, Ayman Al-Zawahiri, in a drone strike in Afghanistan. President Joe Biden says the Al-Qaeda leader was killed in a counter-terrorism operation carried out by the CIA in the Afghan capital of Kabul last weekend. The Al-Qaeda leader and Osama bin Laden plotted the 9/11 attacks together, and he was one of America's most wanted terrorists. The FBI updated its most wanted terrorist poster with Zawahiri's status as deceased. A senior administration official told reporters that U.S. intelligence determined with high confidence that the man killed was Zawahiri and no other casualties occurred. The drone attack is the first known U.S. strike inside Afghanistan since U.S. troops and diplomats left the country in August 2021.
My fellow Americans, on Saturday, at my direction, the United States successfully concluded an airstrike in Kabul, Afghanistan that killed the emir of Al-Qaeda, Ayman Al-Zawahiri. Now, justice has been delivered, and this terrorist leader is no more. That no matter how long it takes, no matter where you hide, if you are a threat to our people, the United States will find you and take you out. And 1 week ago, after being advised that the conditions were optimal, I gave the final approval to go get him. And the mission was a success. None of his family members were hurt, and there were no civilian casualties. I'm sharing this news with the American people now, after confirming the mission's total success through the painstaking work of our counterterrorism community and key allies and partners. When I ended our military mission in Afghanistan almost a year ago, I made the decision that after 20 years of war, the United States no longer needed thousands of boots on the ground in Afghanistan to protect America from terrorists who seek to do us harm. And I made a promise to the American people that we continue to conduct effective counterterrorism operations in Afghanistan and beyond.
Meanwhile, Taliban authorities have tightened security near the site where the Al-Qaeda leader was killed. Armed Taliban soldiers and empty streets could be seen near the site this morning, although no visible damage could be seen. Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid confirmed that a strike took place and strongly condemned it, calling it a violation of international principles. For years, Zawahiri was believed to be hiding along the forbidding border between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Over in Kenya, citizens say the killing of Al-Zawahiri has brought a sense of closure to victims injured in Al-Qaeda's bombing of the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi 24 years ago. Spokesperson of Kenyan Victims Association, Douglas Sidialo, termed the killing an act of God, however, adds that the damages to Kenyan families of victims or those injured in the attack had not been paid. This is despite a promise by President Biden in 2010, when he was vice president, to look into the issue of compensation during a visit to Nairobi. Mr. Sidialo, who became blind as a result of the explosion, adds that Americans should rise up to the occasion and see to it that Kenyan victims are compensated and to ensure the human rights of Kenyans are addressed just as much as the Americans. Just before we go over to our analyst to talk more about this, news just in, it says that 5 more passengers who were kidnapped by terrorists during the attack on a Kaduna-bound train March the 28th have regained their freedom. The security agencies and the federal government are yet to confirm the development, but a member of the negotiating team, Tuka Mamu, told Channels Television that the victims were released today Tuesday. He gave the names of the 5 released hostages as well, and he called them Professor Mustafa Umar Imam, who's a medical officer at the Usman Dan Fodio University Teaching Hospital, Sokoto, Akibu Lawal, Abubakar Ahmed Rufai Mukhtar Shraib, and Sidi Aminu Sharif. Mr. Mamu says he has backed out of the negotiation for the release of the kidnapped victims due to threats to his life, personal integrity, and lack of support from the federal government. News just in that terrorists have released 5 more abducted Kaduna-Abuja train attack victims. Let's go over to the discussion on Zawahiri's killing by the United States. Security analyst Temitope Oludo joins me now for more. Thank you for joining me on the program.
Thank you for having me.
And this is another historic execution by the United States. Zawahiri took over Al-Qaeda after the death of Osama bin Laden. What can you tell us about this man, Ayman Al-Zawahiri, who he was?
It's a man that is known to many around the world as being a terrorist, but actually from a very good home. It's a 71-year-old Egyptian doctor who graduated in 1974, born in June, of course, June 1951, and actually has a master's. He's a doctor. But right from school days in Egypt, he decided to get involved in political Islam, and as a result, he fell foul of the law in Egypt, and he got pulled in on many occasions for his involvement in many atrocities in Egypt, including, the assassination of the Egyptian president. But he was exonerated of that assassination, but found with weapons. So as a result, he went to jail for 3 years. And when he was released around early mid-80s, he decided to move to Saudi Arabia, stayed in Saudi Arabia for a time, moved to Pakistan, and actually got involved with Osama bin Laden. And the two of them started the Al-Qaeda movement, and actually were involved or spearhead the attack on U.S. In September 2001. And he's been targeted on many occasions, including, just like your report clearly highlighted, he was involved in the first attack on African soil, terrorist attack, one of the first attacks of African soil in Kenya. And as a result, a lot of families lost their life. And even 2 weeks after the attack by the U.S. drone, to try and get them out, their camps, he came out and said nobody can get him and things like that. But it's sad that it's good that he's out of the picture, but in the last few years, it's been quite quiet because there's a lot of groups that have actually surpassed Al-Qaeda in terms of their brutality and their hatred of the U.S. government.
And there have been several reactions to this strike. I mean, former U.S. President Barack Obama said on Twitter that the news is also proof that it is possible to root out terrorism without being at war in Afghanistan. He also talked about that he hopes it will provide a small measure of peace to families, to loved ones. But this was a strike, his death happened in Kabul, Afghanistan. Does it raise a question as to the role the Taliban's played in this?
There's no doubt that many will be asking questions that after the fall of Kabul, in terms of the disgraceful exit of the U.S., or the way they managed the exit, one would have thought that with America and other countries saying we're not going to give you aid, we're not going to support your country except you stop sponsoring terrorism and other things, that after that incident, the one of the most wanted terrorists, because there were 22 of them, and he had a $25 million bounty on his head, one would have thought that he would not actually have been killed in Afghanistan. They will have been killed somewhere else, because the Afghan Taliban leaders have come out to say they will not harbor terrorism, and we've seen the kind of fight that they've been having with ISIS instead of all the bombing that have been going on. So it shows that there is still relationship between some terrorist group and the Taliban government or administration that is still there right now. But let's look at it from a different perspective. The perspective we need to look at it is the shift in the American policy. They ceremonially removed all their troops from at least from Afghanistan, but yet they changed their strategic policy. And, instead of putting boots on the ground, they are now using drones. And we know that at least more than 14,000 strikes have been carried out by the Americans. And I think that is the question that we need to look at. Is this the new strategic positions that the Americans will be taking, that they will not be putting their boots on the ground, just like the French are actually changing their policy in Africa? I think those are the questions that we need to look at now.
Interestingly, also, first is, what impact do you think this would have on global security? This is also seeing as that he took over from Osama bin Laden. Could there be another takeover, someone replacing him after this?
There's no doubt that somebody will take over from him. What we don't know is if they will go on a revenge spree, i.e. they might decide to target U.S. interest both within the region or outside the region or other places, i.e. there might be a cry out. We know that after the 2001 incident, 9/11 incident, he actually appeared in 17 videos up to 2007, where he was, more or less encouraging and saying all kind of things similar to what Osama bin Laden did before he was taken out in 2011. So, but what we know about the Al-Qaeda strategy and the way they do things is that they are not the type that are quick to respond. They tend to prefer very grand kind of approach, not like ISIS and the others who might decide to go and attack people on the train and kill 3 or 4 people, or somebody just stand up and start killing in the name of ISIS. They don't do that. So they might be planning a bigger one. But we still don't know. Definitely somebody will take over. What they will plan, we don't know. But we know that this will not stop the Americans actually going after their leaders. Once they come out with a leader and his name is visible, his name will be on the list of the ones to be killed by the Americans. And the Americans will use their drones wherever that person might be hiding around the world, because they've used their drones in Somalia, they've used it in Yemen, they've used it in other countries. So I'm not surprised if Americans will continue to use this strategy instead of having boots on the ground.
Does this provide a small measure of peace to the 9/11 families, everyone else who suffered in the hands of Al-Qaeda, a sense of closure for those that suffered 24 years ago in Nairobi, Kenya?
I think it's a sense of hope for all those, because the people that died in Kenya and the people that died during the 9/11, most of them were not just Americans, but there are also other citizens of the world. But it's a kind of a relief for them to know that somebody will go out. I think it's important for your viewers that are listening to us right now that we had that there was a mock-up of the room, of how, the place where he was. They did a drawing of it, and they were having that conversation in the White House to talk about how they were attacked and the president was getting involved. I know that many people watching me in Nigeria and other parts of the world, we wish that with all these guys that are releasing people onto the highway in Nigeria, that there's a map that is made of those places in Asu Rock, and they are having discussion with Mr. President and saying, this is how we intend to hit it. That is the kind of responsible approach that we're expecting, from the leadership that is trying to hold, people accountable for things that is being done. So I know many people around the world will be happy that this guy is out of the way, and many people will be hoping their leaders will be looking at this example of what has happened in America and be taking those examples and replicating them to deal with issues of security in their homeland.
Indeed, and this was really my final question in terms of the lessons learned for Nigeria and other countries. We heard the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau saying on Twitter that his death is a step towards a safer world. He says Canada will keep working with the global partners to counter terrorist threats, promote peace, security, keep people in Canada at home and around the world safe. Also cited by state news agency Saudi Arabia's foreign ministry, says Al-Zawahiri is considered one of the leaders of terrorism that led the planning execution of the heinous terrorist operations in the U.S. And Saudi Arabia. So, you know, a lot of these comments, reactions about this. But one takeaway for us, Nigeria, seeing as we are facing quite a number of challenges on the security front.
If there's any takeaway, which is what we've been saying all the time, listen, watch, and learn. It took them months. It's not we're on top of it. You don't see the American president coming up and say we're on top of it. It gives his commander, an order. They go out. They're not having meetings every month and coming out and showing us on camera that they've had meeting and the president is on top of it. No, they had a plan. They went out. Intelligence. Money is put in there into intelligent people are going around. We know how Islamic Baladi was targeted. People were going there to say that they were taking immunizations and things like that. What is our own security agents doing? What are they doing with our money? All we're hearing, and I'm not blaming our security, are doing the best they could. We have very good people there, but what we're hearing is people burying money in farms and putting money in abandoned houses. What we want is for the money that is allocated, Nigerian money that's allocated for security, to be used in the right places and for intelligence to be used effectively to root out these people. Just like we had just a few days ago about, neutralizing those people that attacked, the presidential guard. We want more of those proactive approach. That is what we want. And then we'll come here and applaud them for what they're doing. But if they're not doing it, we'll come here and also tell them that they need to do more because Nigerians deserve more.
And just before I let you go, this also is pretty much an ideology, looking at, the Taliban, the way terrorism is in other parts of the world. And it's pretty difficult to kill an ideology. I mean, you can take the person out, but then how do you, face this particular threat?
Very simple. The only way to face this kind of threat is to create a superior narrative. If the narrative is that Western education is wrong, then it is for you to go there and show them that Western education can add value. Western education can help in conjunction with the Islamic teachings, that it could help, and that the Islamic religion itself is against the taking of life. You need to go out there, you need to preach it, you need to use your leaders, you need to use your people to go out there and show yourself accountable to the people. When people see that you are accountable and you are doing the right thing, then people will follow you. But when these people can come out and show that they are not corrupt, they are providing a better service to the people on ground, then, and we have 774 local government, but how many of those local government have light? How many of those local government have water? But here we are seeing every year that budget is being given and the budget is padded, and these amenities is not getting to the people. Then some people will come from nowhere in a government space and provide them with service. What do you expect? What do you expect? There are conflict entrepreneurs that are creeping up every month, every day, every month, that are making money from the conflict that is going on. And yet we are not doing anything about it. And we're not doing anything about it. That is the challenge that we have. But we are good
the narrative.
Great nation, and I know we can do it.
We always appreciate your time on the program. Thank you so much, security analyst Temitope Olodo. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
The U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi has arrived Taiwan about an hour ago, starting a visit that Beijing had warned her against taking, saying it would undermine U.S. relations, U.S. relations. Ms. Pelosi was on a tour of Asia that includes announced visits to Singapore, Malaysia, South Korea and Japan. China claims several Taiwan as its own, and a foreign ministry spokesman had earlier said that any visit by Pelosi would be a gross interference in China's internal affairs, warning that the Chinese People's Liberation Army will never sit idly by. Meanwhile, much earlier, the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken had said that a potential visit to Taiwan by the House of Representatives Speaker would be entirely her decision, but called on China not to escalate tensions in the event of the visit. He made this known after nuclear proliferation talks at the United Nations in New York.
The Speaker will make her own decisions about whether or not to visit Taiwan. Congress is an independent, co-equal branch of government. The decision is entirely the Speaker's. What I can say is this. This is very much precedent in the sense that previous speakers visited Taiwan. Many members of Congress go to Taiwan, including this year. And so if the Speaker does decide to visit and China tries to create some kind of crisis or otherwise escalate tensions, that would be entirely on Beijing. We are looking for them, in the event she decides to visit, to act responsibly and not to engage in any escalation going forward. We do not know what.
Well, China's envoy also re-echoed the country's position to the United Nations that a visit by U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan would undermine China-U.S. relations. China's UN Ambassador Zhang Jun told the briefing that such a visit by Pelosi would be provocative and not comparable to the last time a U.S. House Speaker visited the island claimed by Beijing in 1997. Well, staying with the much-talked-about visit by Ms. Pelosi, Taipei residents were divided over her possible visit. Locals said that Ms. Pelosi will cross China's red line if she really visits the Taiwan region. Another resident said Ms. Pelosi's visit will have no benefit at all for the Taiwan people, but only create more tensions. Some university students also believe the visit would help the Taiwan-U.S. relationship improve, but then another of his classmates said that it won't bring any real benefit. One person familiar with Pelosi's itinerary said most of her planned meetings, including that with Taiwan president, were scheduled for tomorrow, August the 3rd.
It's all about American interests. They use Taiwan, they use the geopolitical measure to benefit themselves. They only care about how the government can be holding the powers in their inland states, right? So they just use Taiwan to get their attention for domestic market. So to secure their power.
Well, Russia also voiced an opposition on the issue of Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. The Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova said that Russia views her visit to Taiwan as a provocation aimed at pressuring Beijing. In a press briefing, she said that Russia supports Beijing's One China principle and opposes Taiwanese independence in any form.
We are considering the possible visit of the Speaker of the House of Representatives of the U.S. Congress, Nancy Pelosi, to Taiwan as yet another provocative action by the U.S. administration, which wants to put an additional pressure on Beijing. We consider the settlement of the situation in the Taiwan Strait to be an internal matter for China. Of course, as an Asia-Pacific state, Russia hopes that the Taiwan problem will be resolved without prejudice to peace and stability in the region.
Welcome back to our coverage of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Russia has accused the U.S. of direct involvement in the war in Ukraine for the first time. This is coming from the spokesperson for Moscow's defense ministry, alleging the U.S. was approving targets for American-made HIMARS artillery used by Kyiv's forces. In the meantime, it's also good news on the deal signed between both countries and the UN in Turkey. This is as the first shipment of Ukrainian grain is being expected tonight in Istanbul for world markets. The announcement was made by the Turkish representative at the Joint Coordination Center in Istanbul, where the new deal was signed. During a briefing earlier today, Rear Admiral Özkan said the course of the ship was going as planned. He said that due to bad weather conditions, the ship would be arriving at the assigned anchorage in Istanbul around midnight, later than estimated, and after the arrival procedures, an inspection will be carried out with a delegation of representatives of Turkey, the Russian Federation, Ukraine and the UN, and the ship will continue on its way. According to the results of the inspection, Monday night, the first shipment of Ukrainian grain departed from the port of Odessa via the Sierra Leone flagship Rozhony, marking the first time in months that Kyiv has transported its goods to purchasing nations. And the crew on board the ship carrying the grain out of Ukraine recall how it felt for them to have been stuck at the port for so long. One of them, Abdullah Jendi, a junior engineer aboard the cargo Rozhony ship, said he was scared that shelling could hit the vessel any moment, as the alarm would go off in the port and he and his fellow crew members would feel that they were in danger and that the ship would be hit. Jendi is happy, though, that they are moving following their prolonged stay in Odessa. He also looks forward to seeing his family sometime this year, as it's already been over a year since he set eyes on them. Officials in Ukraine say at least 17 ships are docked in Black Sea ports with almost 600,000 tons of cargo, mostly grain. To a more worrying issue for the American government in Russia, as lawyers defending U.S. basketball player Brittany Griner say the expert summoned by defense has found some defects in drug expertise carried out by the prosecution. Griner's lawyer, Marina Blagovolina, told journalists at the courthouse in Russia that one of them is that the serial numbers of the machines that were used are not stipulated in the expertise. The American government is hoping to work out a prisoner swap for Griner so she can come home soon. The star U.S. basketball player was detained at Moscow's airport, Sheremetyevo, on February 17, just days before the Russian invasion of Ukraine began on the 24th of February. She has pleaded guilty to a drugs charge in court July 7, but denied she had intentionally broken the law. Russian authorities say the 31-year-old was carrying vape cartridges containing hashish oil, a substance illegal in the country. She faces up to 10 years in jail if found guilty of smuggling a large quantity of drugs. And the Spanish government says businesses, restaurants, museums and public transport in the country will now be required to adhere to strict temperature requirements under emergency measures to save energy. The new directive takes effect a week after publication in the official bulletin and will be in place until November of next year. With temperatures rising this summer and limits on gas supplies because of the war in Ukraine, many European countries have realized the strain on their power systems. A week ago, the EU proposed cutting gas use by 15% from August to March to cope with the situation. The new energy-saving plan also promotes working remotely several days a week to save fuel, switching off lights in public buildings and shop windows when not in use, closing doors to reduce the strain on air conditioning and heating systems in businesses such as restaurants, for example. In the meantime, the UN says key arrangements, including procedures for ships, still need to be worked out before empty vessels can come in and pick cargoes from Ukraine using the new grains corridor. But a plan needs to be put together over the next few days. UN spokesperson says shipping companies and insurers that cover vessels need to be assured that the journey is secure with no threat of mines or attacks to both these ships and their crews. These are typically covered in accepted maritime practices known as standard operating procedures.
The ships that will go in and out of Odessa port will be done, those decisions will be taken by the port authorities of Odessa in terms of how much space they have on the berths. Obviously, there are a number of ships that have been in Odessa for quite some time, so it would be fair to say that the port is congested. As soon as they give the clearance for more ships to come in, those ships will come in. But those will be commercial decisions and operational decisions taken by the Odessa port. The framework that we have will be there to facilitate that movement of ships both in and out with the inspection regime that we've talked about. What we've done is really created, through the MOU, created a climate where commercial operations can take place, right? Where commercial operations to export food, to export fertilizer from Russia can take place. We are not in the business of vetting contracts. We are not in the business of overseeing those commercial enterprises, right? It is the commercial market will function without the need of UN daily interference or operation.
Away from the invasion, following UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres' comments that the world was one misstep away from nuclear annihilation, nations came together at the review conference of the parties to Treaty of Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons at the UN headquarters in New York to discuss the prevention and spread of nuclear weapons to promote the peaceful use of nuclear energy. Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs for Ukraine said the future of NPT was unpredictable after Russia, he claims, breached every existing norm of international law by waging its war against Ukraine. At the same meeting, the Swedish Foreign Affairs Minister stated that the continued expansion and modernization of nuclear arsenals by Russia gave cause to great concern. The Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons came into effect in 1970 and aims to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons and weapons technology, to foster the peaceful uses of nuclear energy and to further the goal of disarmament. This year's conference was scheduled for 2020 but was postponed due to the pandemic.
Today is 159th day of full-scale war unleashed by NPT nuclear power against the NPT non-nuclear state. After Russia has breached every existing norm of international law by waging its war against Ukraine and by clear intention to locate its nuclear arsenal on the territory of nuclear state, does anyone here can predict the future of the NPT? Disarmament has become undermined due to the unjustified development by Russia of its new strike capabilities. Such name is Kinzhal, Sarmat, Poseidon are in air, as Russia is openly threatening the world with a new weaponry. Non-proliferation became an illusion as Russia de facto expanded the geographic area of its nuclear arms deployment after the occupation of Crimea. For the first time in history, civilian nuclear facilities have been turned into the military targets and springboards for the Russian army in breach of the NPT provisions on the peaceful use of nuclear energy. The world witnessed how nuclear terrorism, sponsored by the nuclear weapon state, is arising in reality.
And to other stories, news of the death in Kerala from monkeypox, talking about India, followed that in Ghana, which recorded the first death from the virus in the current outbreak. The infected person was a military officer who died 3 days after reporting to a hospital northeast of the country. He had a fever, a skin rash, but no further details were given. 13 people who are believed to have come into contact with the man who died are in isolation and are currently being monitored. Ghana has so far recorded more than 30 cases of the virus in 7 regions of the country. The illness is caused by the monkeypox virus, member of the same family of viruses as smallpox, although it is much less severe, and experts say chances of infection are low. Staying in Ghana, which has recorded deaths from another virus, the Marburg virus this time. The victims are a 14-month-old baby and her father, the father being the first person to have died in the country. They are the first deaths from the current outbreak there as well. The baby's mother has tested positive for the virus, but doctors say she's alive and well and is receiving care in an isolation center to prevent further spread of the illness. Another patient, though thought to have died of Marburg, was later confirmed negative after post-mortem tests revealed the 51-year-old man did not in fact have the disease. The Marburg virus is highly infectious, similar to Ebola, causing fever, muscle pains, diarrhea, vomiting, and in some cases death through extreme blood loss. Well, back to the case of the monkeypox in India. They confirmed their first death caused by the virus in the southern state of Kerala. A 22-year-old man who had recently traveled to the state from the United Arab Emirates. He died on Saturday. The ministry there said the man had initially tested positive for the virus abroad, and samples tested after his death also detected the virus. Joining us for more is VOA's Anjana Pasricha. Thank you for joining me on the program. First, give us the latest. We understand there are 20 persons who came into contact with him. They've been isolated and they're being monitored. What are the developments?
Yeah, well, those being monitored include his family and the people he met after he came from the United Arab Emirates about a week ago. Fortunately, so far, health authorities have not reported any infections among his contacts.
All right. The WHO has declared monkeypox a global health emergency, and this was done last month. Many countries have different measures. What's India? How are they trying to stem the spread of the virus?
Well, actually, India only has a handful of cases so far, 8 to be precise. 5 have been reported from Kerala, that is the southern state where the 22-year-old man died. 3 persons have tested positive in New Delhi. According to domestic media reports, they include 2 Nigerian nationals, a 31 and a 35-year-old who were working in the city and are currently undergoing treatment. What India is doing is stepping up surveillance, especially from international airports. It has set up isolation wards. It is even asking vaccine makers in India to try and develop a vaccine against monkeypox.
But is there a vaccine as of now for monkeypox in India?
There isn't a vaccine as of now. As far as I understand, it's a smallpox vaccine can also be used in place of monkeypox, for treating monkeypox. But so far, India is not undertaking any vaccination program for monkeypox.
And like COVID-19, people with underlying illnesses can be more susceptible. Are there any persons based on medical history who could be more susceptible to monkeypox? Also, is there confirmation as to how they got the disease?
Well, the man in Kerala who has died, we can say how he got it, but it's difficult to say how he got it. The 22-year-old came from the United Arab Emirates, as I said, where he had already tested positive for monkeypox, according to his family. After coming to India, he did not inform health authorities. In fact, all the 5 cases in Kerala are persons who came from UAE. A lot of people in that state work in the Middle East. The 3 cases in Delhi are all people who have no travel history.
That's interesting. Another interesting thing to note is we understand that there were no rashes on his body. And, you know, a few of the time, most people think that is one important symptom for monkeypox. Are Indians abreast of what this virus is and the many symptoms and how it could affect people, attack the immune system?
Well, first of all, I think initially there were some reports that he did not have skin rashes. But later on, the authorities clarified that he did have skin rashes. What happened was that he only came to hospital when, I think the infection was far advanced and he had very high fever. Now, as for Indians being abreast as to what is monkeypox, I think that now it is in the news. They are coming to learn about the virus. Where medical personnel are concerned, India does have skilled doctors who have the knowledge to handle such infections.
All right. Finally, are there any other measures the government has taken to handle monkeypox? This is while it handles other infectious diseases. I mean, there's still COVID-19 and the rest.
Absolutely. Well, the government on Monday has set up a task force to monitor the outbreak nationally, under which it can send experts to various states which might get outbreaks of monkeypox. And as I said earlier, it's also invited domestic vaccine makers to consider making shots against monkeypox. Besides that, it is intensifying surveillance at airports, setting up isolation wards in hospitals.
Viewers, Anjana Pashricha, thanks so much for joining me on the program.
Thank you.
Let's turn to the United States, where the state Kentucky has recorded the deaths of nearly 40 people due to floods unleashed by torrential rains in the east. The state's governor, Andy Beshear, warned there could be more dangerous weather ahead. Authorities are still working to rescue residents and to provide food and shelter for thousands of people who have been displaced. Efforts have, however, been hampered by weather conditions. According to officials, many residents have been unprepared for the heavy downfall overnight, leading to more deaths for people remaining in eastern Kentucky, and the governor is advising people to seek higher ground ahead of the storms this evening.
She's inside. Okay.
And away from the United States, the wife of a Nigerian street trader who was killed in Italy says she is seeking justice following his painful death. Her husband, 39-year-old Aliku Ogochukwu, was reportedly selling handkerchiefs in the seaside town of Sivatinova, Marche, on Friday when he was chased and beaten to death. A 32-year-old Italian has been arrested on suspicion of murder and robbery. The video circulating online shows a man on top of Ogochukwu punching him with his bare hands. None of those who witnessed the broad daylight attack appeared to intervene. Ms. Charity Oriachi said she had received help in coming to terms with her husband's death, but was tired of talk now. She was only interested in justice, she insists. She says her family had lived in Italy for a long time, stressing that her husband had never sought any trouble. We earlier spoke to VOA Sabina Castelfranco in Italy about the latest in our earlier program, Network Africa.
The man basically grabbed the Nigerian, threw him onto the ground, used a crutch that the Nigerian was using to walk to finish him off. He really didn't have a chance, and it was all very, very quick, and there were many people standing by, and no one apparently, as you said, intervened in any way whatsoever. By the time the authorities arrived, the Nigerian man had been killed and he had lost his life. Well, his identity, absolutely, yes. They know he's a 32-year-old. They have a name. They have apprehended him. He is in jail at the moment. Now, the motive remains unclear. I mean, it remains to be clarified and further investigated. The police has only said, as I mentioned before, that this was not a racially motivated attack. It could be the fact that the street vendor grabbed onto this man's partner by the arm that really bothered him. But of course, you know, you don't go around killing people because someone grabs you by the arm. So I think there's going to be much further investigations taking place. I think the police is going to go through the video that has been handed over with regards to the incidents. I think it's early days yet to understand exactly what motivated this killing.
Now we head to Madagascar, where insects are considered tasty seasonal snacks, thereby making researchers to create a buzz with edible insect products. They also use the insects to produce low-cost fertilizer. Take a look.
The Valhalla Farms project is housed at Madagascar's Biodiversity Center, located in the capital, Antananarivo. The unit researches, breeds and processes insects into high-protein human and animal food. Entomologist and Valhalla founder Brian Fisher says Madagascar has at least 80 unique species of insects. The project's mission is to work at creating more ways to supply edible insects to Madagascar's consumers, institutions and farmers, all year round.
Our research on how to dry and prepare the insects took us about 3 years. During this time, we were able to train and gain the necessary experience, as well as obtain the authorizations from the Ministry of Health and the international qualifications. Now, we are multiplying and improving the product and finding the means to have the necessary materials to increase our production. This will be our contribution to our fight against malnutrition in Madagascar.
The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization says that farmers will need to increase harvests by at least 70% to cater to the 9.1 billion people populating the earth by 2050. Adventurous customers can try small bowls of insects, including mealworms, as well as larger dried mopane worms, which are already considered a delicacy in some African countries.
We know that people have their preferences. For example, in the north, some insects are more popular than meat. Our role is to ensure that insects are always available and in sufficient quantities.
The FAO says insects produce less waste. The excrement, called frass, is an excellent fertilizer and soil amender.
Tasty or not? I'll let you decide. That's the program this evening. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Walker. Bye for now.